Hello and welcome to Talking Aussie Books, a new weekly podcast shining a spotlight on Australian fiction. My name is Claudine Tinellis. As a writer and avid reader, I love chatting about books. And in this podcast, I'll chat to authors, publishers and readers, giving you, dear listener, insight into what's hot on the Australian fiction scene. So if you're looking for your next book recommendation or just want to know more about Aussie fiction writers, this podcast is for you. Grab yourself a cuppa, sit back and enjoy. Well, here we are again, another week, another podcast, and another fabulous debut Aussie author to interview. How lucky can a girl get? Today I have the very great privilege to chat to Cassie Hamer, whose debut novel, After the Party, was released by HQ Fiction, a wonderfully entertaining and heartwarming novel. You'll never look at a kid's birthday party in quite the same way again. It's my pleasure to welcome Cassie to the podcast. Hi, Cassie.
Hey, Claudine. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I have listened to a lot of the episodes and I do love the way that you champion Aussie fiction writers and especially women. You have lots of women on, which is just wonderful.
Oh, thank you. I absolutely love doing this podcast, and speaking to people like you is just thrilling for me. Congratulations on the publication of your very first novel. I'm so excited for you.
Oh, man, I am still pinching myself that this thing has actually seen the light of day. I sign books and it really feels like a dream. Quite incredible and surreal to walk into a shop and see the book on the shelf. And there's been so many nice aspects to it, one of which is the way my three little girls have been so proud of me for doing it. They've kind of moved on now, like they were proud for about, a day, and now they're kind of back self-absorbed in their own lives. But that's been lovely. The support of the other writers in this incredible community of writers that we have in Australia has been lovely. I'm starting to get a bit of feedback from readers. My friends and family have possibly been even more excited about it than I am, which is saying something. But I'm trying to also keep it very much in perspective, because I think it is true what other writers have said, in that being published doesn't really change your life. Like, still for me, the joy of writing is in the sitting down and the actual creation of story. And so being published, I guess, doesn't change that in a way. But what it does, I suppose, give me is a bit of validation, and now I have a justifiable reason for sitting down and just creating stories in my head. So all of that has been really lovely.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And look, I'm sure that you were well justified in advance of publication to sit down and create the stories that you're creating, because this book was truly a wonderful read.
Thank you, Claudine. It still shocks me and surprised me and makes me feel a little embarrassed when people say that, because I think of all the criticism of the book that I got along the way. And a few days ago, I made the mistake of having a look at the first draft of the book, and it's kind of awful. I just think, this poor manuscript assessor that I initially sent it to, that poor woman, and what a gift she gave me in the way that she went through the manuscript quite forensically and gave me very direct and honest criticism / support. But I think the one thing she told me is that she thought that there was still some merit in pursuing it. And I clung to that, I think, through the process of rewriting the book, which I did on the strength of her recommendations, because she was a very well-regarded writer and editor in her own right. And I just thought, well, who's the idiot if I don't take this advice? Like, it's just me. It was a little bit hard to hear, but the end result of the book is just so much better.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, isn't it? To essentially not give up, which is what you did. You didn't give up on it.
Yeah, I think that's true. Pretty much everyone who pursues it and keeps going, they get there in the end. It's quite remarkable. There's a few writers that I feel like I've been emerging with along the way, and we're all starting to make some progress, and that's just because we stuck at it and kept going. So people say this all the time, but you can never say it enough. Just persistence is the key. If you love it, just keep going. If at the end of the day you don't really love it and your only goal is to be published, then I think it's fine to give it away. Like, don't pursue it unless it makes you happy, because it's not like there's going to be enormous, financial rewards at the end of the day. But if this is for you and this is your passion, you will get there in the end.
I think that's excellent and very sound advice for aspiring writers out there, most definitely.
I hope so, because
including myself.
Well, yeah, and I've up until a few days ago, I was also in that position of listening to writing podcasts and thinking, wow, I would love that to happen for me, but will it ever happen?
Yeah.
And I guess the way in which my manuscript came to be published was a little bit unusual, because it was picked up off the delightfully named slush pile at Harlequin. So I really was extremely fortunate to get published, because I think, as most aspiring writers know, approximately 0.0001% of manuscripts that are submitted to the slush pile actually get published. So I definitely think I won my golden ticket when the lovely reader at Harlequin picked it up and thought, yeah, actually this is not too bad.
As many listeners already know, I'm a parent of three myself, 3 children, and have certainly done my fair share of kids' birthday parties as both a host and a guest. So I found the premise of your book especially intriguing. And if you're a parent of a child about to go into kindergarten, this book is essential reading, in my opinion.
About what not to do. How not to host a party.
Yeah, most definitely. So, Cassie, for those who haven't read it yet, can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Sure. So it is about a 5th birthday party that goes terrifically and horribly badly. And the mother, Lisa Wheeldon, she wakes late on the morning of the party. So that's the first problem, because nothing is actually quite ready to go. She hasn't finished off the food. She hasn't done the cake. The whole house needs cleaning. So she's absolutely frantic. And then 32 children arrive on her doorstep, because she's invited the whole of her daughter's kindergarten class. And the 32 kids do pretty much proceed to trash the place. And they're saying this party's boring, the pass the parcel's a bit lame, and the piñata doesnn't work, because piñatas never work. But eventually Lisa does survive. She makes it to the end. She thinks that all the kids have been collected and have gone home. But just as she's about to breathe her big sigh of relief, she actually finds a little girl hiding in the backyard. And this little girl's name is Ellie. And at first Lisa thinks, well, Ellie's mum's just running late. It's cool, she'll be here. But then she gets a note via a birthday present, which suggests that, in fact, Ellie's mum has no intention of coming to pick her up, and that she wants Lisa to take care of this child. And Lisa is thrown into a flat spin, because she doesn't actually know the parent. She doesn't really know the child. And so the story unfolds, and it's basically her journey to figure out who this mother is and why she would undertake such a desperate act as to abandon her child with a virtual stranger.
Yeah. I mean, it's really compelling reading. I loved it, and it had me hooked from start to finish. And as I said in my introduction, it's a book that can't fail to have readers thinking about the whole kids' birthday party phenomenon. So I wanted to ask you, was there a particular event that perhaps sparked the idea for this book?
Oh, yes, I have an abandoned child in my backyard, Claudine. No, I don't. Look, I have had some parties which have teetered on the edge of disaster, and I think actually all birthday parties tend to do that, because you have very hyped up children. You have activities where there is generally winners and losers, and kids are just so awesome at losing, as we all know. And then you throw into that a whole lot of sugar. And usually there's not a lot of parental supervision if you're hosting it in the home and you're having more than 10 kids. Maybe you and possibly your partner, and all the parents all tend to nick off and go and have a coffee or something. So, but there's always that moment at the end of the party where I breathe a huge sigh of relief because the kids have all been picked up. And I guess one party, I thought to myself, well, what would happen if a parent didn't come back to pick up their child? And I mean, I have hosted parties where I didn't necessarily know every single child and parent that well. So that was really the spark for the story.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a strange phenomenon, really. I mean, I hear what you're saying, that, you don't
Yeah,
always have, you don't always
yeah.
know that the people, the parents of the children in your child's class. And I've always been really, and this is something that Lisa kind of deals with, when she's having this birthday party, is that, these parents who kind of just drop and run.
Jump and run. Don't we all do that? But yeah, it's like from 0 to 4, parents will stick to their kids at a party. And I think that's often because the kids are very unpredictable and they may or may not actually be even toilet trained, which is an issue. But then once school hits, everyone seems to disappear. And it's like the next step is that the kid's going to get their driver's license because suddenly they're just left to roam by themselves. And you have this weird implicit trust in someone who you may have only really seen at the school gate a few times, but somehow we rationalise to ourselves that it's completely fine because, yes, they have the same school teacher, so of course these parents are completely fine. The book exploits that rather strange phenomenon, but I think it then also goes on to explore what it does mean to be a good mother. And because these two women, Lisa and Ellie's mother, I mean, they're both what I would consider to be good mothers, but one of them has to do something very desperate, I guess, to preserve her child's safety and security.
Yeah.
So that's also something I wanted to explore.
Indeed. Now, it's only been out for a little over a week and being received quite well. Do you think that this says something to you about the kinds of issues that resonate with today's readers and the kinds of books that you want to write?
Definitely. I think for me, the biggest writing inspiration is Liane Moriarty. I think she's amazing, and her books really switched me on to the concept of domestic situations and settings being worthy of exploration in fiction and worthy of exploration in a way that includes both humour and darkness, which I think is what life generally is like. I hope that everyone's life isn't just all bleak. And I know for sure that people's lives aren't always hilariously funny. So there is that blend, which I hope is encapsulated in After the Party, which does veer between moments of high chaos and hilarity and also moments of real tenderness and sadness, I guess, in some ways. I think the other beautiful thing about the times that we live in at the moment is that there is a real hunger for women's stories and women's voices. And I think this is a direct result of the amazing gains that we've made through feminism, that these voices and stories are now deemed worthy of consideration, and not only worthy, but really popular. I mean, there's a huge hunger out there from readers for these sorts of stories, I think. I mean, we all know that women are the main buyers of books, and then they're the main readers of fiction. So, of course, the female audience is going to want to see their own lives, their own stories replicated on the pages.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and it's interesting to me that you mentioned, Liane Moriarty, because your book had a lot of, echoes of Liane's style in the sense that, you've dealt with some serious themes, but with a relatively light touch. You're talking about women trying to balance careers and families, love, marriage, negotiating schoolyard politics, and you've even managed to throw in a bit of a mystery. So I kind of, immediately started thinking back to Liane's Big Little Lies. And I think, if listeners out there are fans of Liane's books, you'll certainly love After the Party.
I always cringe a little when I mention my own book in connection with hers because she is so good at what she does. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm, got that same skill. I mean, she is incredible at creating character, but there's no doubt that her work definitely was an inspiration to me. And I think her global success really has paved the way for a lot of us to get into this industry. I mean, of course, there have been successful Australian female writers before. I don't deny that. But just to break globally in the way that she has, I think has given publishers some confidence that these sorts of stories can be commercially successful.
Yes, I agree. Cassie, you once had a career as a journalist and in PR. So what made you want to be a writer?
That's a really good question. I think having children definitely was instrumental in me turning to writing. And it's probably not for the reason you suspect, but it's after I had my second child, um, I decided to go to university and do a master's in creative writing. And I was also blogging about motherhood. And the thing was that I found it difficult to make that transition from career to being a mum. I desperately wanted to be a mother. I wanted to be at home with the children. I didn't want to work. But I also found that being alone with a crying child in the bedroom can be the loneliest place in the world. And there were times when I just thought my life was over. And I guess in a way, life as I knew it was over and that I had this new world to navigate. But I needed something for me. I needed a way to occupy my mind so that I just didn't obsess constantly about the children and literally dissect their nappies and try and decipher what each bowel movement meant and whether they were okay. I needed an escape and writing provided that for me.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think you would be alone in that
No, I don't think so.
space.
It wasn't not like I certainly didn't suffer from depression because I, there were moments of great joy and I was overall very happy to have had the children and very grateful and they were healthy and I look back with some fondness on those early days, but I also look back and remember the loneliness and the challenge of it. And a baby's cry is designed to really pull those emotional heartstrings. And it certainly did that for me. And it just wasn't that healthy for me to just completely marinate in that world the whole time.
Yeah, yeah. No, I completely understand. Cassie, I love the relationship between Lisa and her sister Jamie. They were two very different women, and yet they were bound so tightly by their common experience of adversity. Was this bond something in particular you wanted to explore, or more just where the story took you?
No, I definitely wanted to write about sisters, and I wanted to write about sisters who were quite different. And I have a sister, and we are quite different, funnily enough.
Yeah.
Um, so it's something that is familiar to me. And I did want Lisa to be a really sweet, loving, good hearted, slightly daffy person. But I needed a counterpoint to that because that, quite frankly, can be a bit annoying after a while. So I think having Jamie with her slightly sharper edges just provides a nice bit of relief. I also wanted to give Jamie a romance subplot because I just love a little dose of romance in whatever I read. I think I'm at heart, I am a bit of a hopeless romantic. So that was a useful way of injecting that into the plot as well.
Yeah, fantastic job. And when you think about it, what Lisa did was incredibly brave. Um, looking after this little girl. Do you think there's a reticence out there nowadays for people to stand up and do the right thing? For example, to put children's welfare ahead of other considerations. And in particular, I'm thinking about, things that have happened recently, some notorious incidents that have been reported in the media lately where good people know that, children may have been in risky situations but preferred to stay silent and do nothing.
Definitely. That definitely happens. And I think, well, I think about myself and my situation that I'm in at the moment. There's something inside of me that would deeply love to be a foster carer or an emergency carer, because I do feel this, that we all have a collective responsibility to care for children who are vulnerable. But then on the other hand, I have three of my own children. We have a very busy life, and I worry about my capacity to really give properly to another little human being in the household.
Yeah.
But I do foresee a future in which my kids are a bit more grown up and robust, and that we could introduce that to our lives. But yeah, I think people are a bit scared to speak up. Sometimes maybe they're worried about the repercussions for themselves. I certainly think we're getting a lot better at protecting children, but you still hear, I watched a documentary on Four Corners probably a couple of years ago now, and it was about group homes. And this I've included in the book, this concept of group homes, which is where foster care has kind of broken down. And so children kind of a teenage age are put into group homes. And this reporter revealed that in a lot of situations, these group homes are quite poorly run. And, I don't want anyone to think that I think poorly of foster carers or people who work in group homes, but there's no doubt that there are a few instances where a child has been taken from a vulnerable situation and then been put into an even more vulnerable situation. And I just don't think there's a worse thing that you could do to a child, really. And I think people have great decency and they have a real desire to want to do the right thing. But then we also have other competing responsibilities, and we have great fears about doing the wrong thing, I think, sometimes. So we're kind of rendered inert or immobile and just tend to do nothing because of often just shock or fear or uncertainty, I think. One thing I've learned, though, about when I became a mother was that I felt protective not only to my own children, but I suddenly felt not suddenly, I'd always been a fairly maternal person. I'm not a great mother. I'm not a perfect mother. I'm not saying that, but I do have great stirrings of tenderness and emotion towards children. And one thing I did realise is that the child didn't have to be biologically related to me for me to feel that tenderness. And I think what I tried to do was inject that sensibility into Lisa.
Yeah, and you absolutely have achieved that. You've done a marvellous job with it. So I wanted to ask you if you're working on anything else at the moment.
I am. I've actually submitted a second book to my publisher. I don't think she's read it yet, so I won't say too much about it because it could change radically. But at the moment, it's basically a story of a very idyllic street in which three neighbours live side by side, and a new family moves into the street and things all start to turn very bad. So it's a little bit Desperate Housewives, but without all the insane craziness. Like they're a bit more normal. Yeah, it's tricky in this launch phase because then I'm trying to still keep writing as much of it as I can, but I'm finding that all this stuff around the launch, which is just so lovely and such a privilege, but it is harder for me to keep my head in the fictional world. So in a way, I'm glad that second book is kind of at least drafted and put aside, because it is difficult once you have a book out there in the early days to really focus on writing. But gosh, I am looking forward to getting back to it. When this whole circus caravan moves on, it's just going to be me in my tracky dacks with the dog asleep at my feet in my kitchen, just bashing out the words. And I think that seems very pleasant.
Indeed it does. So Cassie, where can listeners find out a bit more about you and your books?
Probably best to go to my website, which is cassiehamer.com. I'm on all the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, pretty easy to find. And I do love to hear from people. So if you're at all interested in dropping me a line, I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Cassie's book, After the Party, is available now from good bookstores or selected e-retailers. Thank you so much for joining me on Talking Aussie Books.
It's been lots of fun, Claudine. Thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure. And for a chance to get your hands on a signed copy of this heartwarming and funny read, head over to my Instagram account and follow the directions to enter the draw to win. Well, that's a wrap, folks. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on iTunes or drop me a line via my Instagram at Claudine Tinellis or on my webpage claudinetинellis.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, happy reading.